What's good, y'all? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the Free Hour. It's your boy Trevor Turner, back with another episode of the Free Hour ABCs, the ABCs of Tree. Man, we're almost done. We're almost done with this series. We're on the letter X. And today we're going to be talking about something that is just basically a step. It's a step in the same direction of everything that we have been building on, everything that we have been talking about, everything that we have been working towards, and this is execution. This is how we just get to it. So we're going to talk about the critical role of execution in achieving goals and turning plans into reality. Because Thomas Edison said, vision without execution is hallucination. Just like Denzel Washington said, dreams without goals fuels disappointment. One of the things that we need to realize is that we can get stuck in the planning stage. We can get stuck up here for so long that we never actually get to doing what it is that we said we were going to do. That we never actually got to the point that we were going to do and move on the plans, act on the plans. A lot of that happens when we try to chase perfection over authenticity. We try to chase what's perfect instead of what's real. We try to get everything right, trying to wait for the perfect moment, trying to wait for that perfect person to come along, trying to wait for that perfect partner to come along, trying to wait for the perfect equipment, trying to wait for the perfect timing, trying to wait for the perfect script, right? Trying to wait for everything to be just right. But one of the things that I had to realize is that I had the beginnings of the plan, I had the dream, and if I really wanted to set those things in motion, I just had to execute. I just had to go for it. I just had to start. So we're going to talk about the science of execution. We're going to talk about strategies for effective execution. We're going to talk about overcoming the common obstacles, how to get out of your head and how to get actually doing it, and the impact of execution on success. So first off, we're going to define execution. We're going to understand execution. Execution is the act of carrying out a plan or task effectively. Execution is crucial for success in every endeavor. So we're going to talk about a study by the Harvard Business Review real quick. This study explores the importance of execution in achieving business success compared to having a great strategy. And first of all, the Harvard Business Review often publishes articles and case studies emphasizing that while strategy is important, execution is crucial for realizing strategic goals. This research indicates that many organizations don't fail to have a plan, they fail to actually execute that plan effectively. A lot of times what happens is that these organizations, they fail either because one, they don't start to execute, and two, when they do execute, they don't execute effectively. So one of the things that we have to realize is that there are two ways that we can fail here. One of the things that we can do is we can just stay in the strategizing mode. We can stay in the planning mode. We can stay in that mode where we're just like deciding what it is that we're going to do. We can stay in that mode where we're always constantly looking up the best investments. We can stay in that mode where we're constantly trying to send out resumes or trying to compare different places that we could live and could move to, but never actually pulling the trigger on job offers, never actually pulling the trigger on interviews, never actually pulling the trigger on opening up that investment account with Schwab or with Vanguard or with Stash or Robinhood or whatever the case may be, never actually pulling the trigger on those things. You can't win if you don't play. What happens is that we can have the best strategy in the world. We can have the best idea in the world. But if that idea stays an idea, it will never come to fruition. If we stay asleep, we can have the best dream in the world. But nothing comes to a sleeper but a dream. We have to get up and we have to work for it. We have to execute. We have to take those strategies and put them into action. We have to put them into play. We have to put them into motion. We have to get moving. We have to do something. And that is the first step for execution. The second step for execution is that we have to ensure that our strategies are effectively implemented to achieve the desired outcomes. Is that when we are executing, we have to go back to like One of the things that we've talked about with every single letter, with every single topic that we've talked about, we have to be mindful. We have to look at everything we're doing through the lens of, does this get me to where I want to go? Does the way I'm implementing this strategy, does the way that I am putting this idea into action or into motion, does this get me to where I want to go? Is this the right way to implement this thing? Is this the right way to do this thing? One of the things you have to do and realize is that it's important to pull that trigger. It's important to pull that trigger, but just as important as it is to pull that trigger, it's important to look at how you're pulling the trigger, how you're executing, how you're putting those things into motion, how you're putting those things into play, how you're putting your starting five up against their starting five. And you have to say to yourself, is this getting me to where I want to go? Is my daily routine getting me to where I want to go? Is the way I'm investing getting me to where I want to go? We're past the learning stage. We're in the action stage. We're in the doing stage. And the way I am doing these things conducive to where I want to go? Is it fitting and lining up with all that time that I spent strategizing, with all that time that I spent planning, with all that time that I spent at the drawing board, with how excited I was about those ideas, with how brilliant I knew those ideas were? I knew these ideas were $1 million ideas. Am I doing $1 million execution? Am I putting the effort forth, the same amount of effort that I put into planning these things? Am I putting the same amount of passion as when I was thinking about these things? Am I putting the same amount of determination as when I was dreaming about these things? Am I putting that same level into it? Am I executing? Am I leaving anything on the table? Am I leaving anything in the tank? Am I going in the right direction? Am I going in the optimal direction? And then am I doing it in the best possible way that I can? Am I putting my best foot forward? And am I always doing my best? Am I being impeccable with my word? Am I running it down the way that I know I can? And that's basically, in a nutshell, the importance of execution. That's the importance of execution. One, we got to pull that trigger. We have to start. You have to go. You have to start moving. You have to get into motion. You have to take action. You have to set the goals, and you have to start going for these goals, because the dreams without goals fuel disappointment. You have to start moving, because the vision, the dreams without action is just hallucination. You have to start going. And then when you're going, you have to realize, is this step the right step? Is that step that I just took the right step? Do I need to change direction? Do I need to change my trajectory? But you don't stop moving. You don't stop executing. Am I doing this to the best of my abilities? Am I putting all of my heart and soul into this? The same way that I knew I was going to up in here. Am I doing that? Am I doing it the right way? And what do I have to do to get to doing it the right way? It's the importance of execution over strategy. So next, we're going to talk about the science behind execution. The brain's prefrontal cortex, it plays a role in planning and executing tasks. One of the things that we've talked about many a time, when you visualize an activity, when you visualize a goal, when you visualize an outcome, your mind actually starts to go through all the motions and all the things that the same receptors fire. Everything happens as if you had already done that thing. As if we had already done that thing. But the thing that also plays into this is will and willpower. It comes into self-regulation, how mental energy is used in executing plans. And we just talked about this really in depth with will and willpower last week. But we're going to just take another little quick look at it. We're going to talk about Roy Baumeister's research on self-regulation and willpower. Dr. Roy Baumeister is a prominent psychologist known for his research on self-control, ego depletion, willpower. His studies focus on how self-control can be seen as a finite resource that gets depleted with use, but can be strengthened over time. The research suggests that willpower operates like a muscle that can become fatigued after use, but also can be strengthened with regular exercise. And the way that he studied, he did this with the radish and the cookie experiment. He demonstrated that participants who exerted willpower in resisting cookies had less self-control in subsequent tasks, showing that willpower can be depleted. And what this goes to show with our execution is that we need to know that we're on the right path. This goes back to what we were talking about. We need to know that we don't have to exert force on ourselves to get ourselves to moving, to get ourselves to going. Because once we use that muscle and once we flex that muscle, it can get depleted, it can get weaker. That's why we have to stay mindful of the things that we're doing. Understanding willpower is a finite resource. It helps us manage our self-control better and plan our tasks to optimize our performance. Once we pull that trigger, once we're going and we're on this journey, because we've spent enough time strategizing, we've spent enough time going over ideas, we've spent enough time going over the content we want to make, we've spent enough time going over the books we want to write, we've spent enough time on where we want to put our money and the financial lane we want to get into, we've spent enough time visualizing. Now it's time to attack. The way that we can go about this, understanding that willpower is a finite resource, it helps us to optimize the things that we are doing. It helps us to make sure that the things that we are doing are going to run smoothly, that we don't have to exert so much force, that we don't have to do constant maintenance, that we don't have to take a constant step back and a constant stop and go action. We can just know that we're going on the right path, smooth sailing down smooth track. So next, we're going to talk about strategies for effective execution. And this goes back to a lot of the things that we've been talking about, man, but it's really simple. It's about setting clear goals. It's about time management. It's about prioritization. It's about building habits. It's about creating action plans. It's about everything that we have been talking to up until this point, except just putting it into action. Breaking down goals into actionable steps and then doing them. Doing them in an optimized way that you know your willpower muscle is strong enough to handle at the time. Doing them in small bite-sized steps, knowing that your small habits can lead to bigger things. So that way that your willpower muscle can become stronger. That way you can handle more of a load on yourself. That way you can get to doing things in a more optimized way for bigger things, for bigger changes, for bigger destinations, bigger desires, and bigger dreams. That's how you can get there. And then that's how we do our goals. That's how we do our action plan, and we do our time management. The role of time management in effective execution is, to me, one of the most important things because it overcomes procrastination. Time management is how you set your lens, how you look at the activities that you're doing, or how you look at the activities that you're going to do throughout the week or throughout the month, or however you balance out your day. Me personally, I like to go by the week. I like to go by the quadrant-based time management system that Covey talks about. I like to look at my roles and I like to plan out my week, and I like to execute the things during my week according to where I want to go as that role, as it pertains to that role. And when I am first starting out on something, with my free hours, I take it in very small, bite-sized chunks, very attainable, very achievable, very easy. And it's something that I even did when I started working out. It's something that I tell people when they start working out. How much are you doing today? How much are you doing right now? Nothing. So you want to get out there and you want to start running a mile every day. No, go run 1 lap every day. Well, that ain't enough, but it's more than what you've been doing. And it's enough that you know you can do it every single day. Instead of trying to do 1,000 push-ups, do 100 push-ups. That may not feel like much, but you're doing it every single day. You want to read a whole chapter a day? That chapter might get daunting. You haven't read a whole chapter. You haven't read a book since Pac died. You haven't consistently taken the time to start learning things that are going to help benefit you. You haven't consistently taken that time away from your phone and away from social media. You haven't consistently taken that time away from watching TV or binge watching a series that you probably already watched before. You haven't consistently taken that time. So instead of trying to read the whole chapter a day, read a couple pages a day. And it may seem like it's so fucking easy, but it's more than what you were doing before. Your willpower muscle is flexing, it's getting stronger. You are executing. You are going towards your end goal. And then what happens is that now that your willpower muscle has been flexed, now you can start to add more things into your time management. Now you can start to add more things into leading up to and adding up to this role that you want to get to on your quadrant-based time management system. Now you can start to add more things into that free hour. Now you can start to change around your free hour to different times of your day to start implementing new things. Now you can start to do that because your willpower muscle is strong enough to get out there and do an entire burpee workout, to get out there and then do an entire 5-mile run, to get out there and read a whole chapter when you wake up in the morning and another one at night, or one when you're on the bus every single day, or taking the time to do 30 to 45 minutes of a language lesson every single day, or taking the time to do 30-45 minutes of studying the markets every single day, 30 to 45 minutes of contacting and calling people in real estate, contacting and calling people in the business sector who may be trying to sell businesses that you can get involved with. Learning about those things, trying to build credit, trying to build business credit, trying to do all of those things. Now that you have flexed your willpower muscle enough by making one call a day, now you can do 15 calls a day. Now you can do 20 calls a day. Now you can do 100 calls a day. Now you can do 200 calls a day. Because what happens is that you started. Don't make it so daunting that you cannot handle it, that you cannot manage it, that you cannot fit it into what it is that you're already doing. And then prioritize. Fit it into what you're already doing. Make it a priority. Make it take precedence over the other things that you are already doing. Prioritize your task. And so the way that I use with the roles, and I do it with my habit stacking and my habit linking, is that I take the things that I want to develop and implement into my life, and I make those take precedence over the other things that I want to do. That means that the things that I want to do, the things that I am trying to replace, or the things that I'm trying to put on the back burner, I make those things secondary, or I make those things a reward, or I make those things positive reinforcement. So I do scroll social media. I do like the pictures I see on social media, all the funny stuff I see on social media. I do play my video games. I do watch my stuff on TV, on my streaming services. I watch my anime. I do all of that shit, right? But the thing that I do is I give precedence to the other things. And I say I can do those other things once I've done this. Once I have fully implemented this, I can find the spare time for these other things instead of trying to find the spare time for the main thing, for the thing that you know is important, for the thing that you know is going to get you to that role that you want to be, for the thing that you know is going to get you to that goal, for that execution. You make those things become the main thing, and you find the spare time for the other things. It's just as simple as that when it comes to prioritization. Is that you constantly are looking at the roles that you want to become. You are constantly tweaking and developing your schedule based upon the performance of it last week. You're working on the one for next week, but you're doing it in motion. That is the point of execution. You're doing it in motion. You're doing it while you're moving. You're doing it while you're walking. You're changing direction to fit where your steps are going. You're not stopping to look at that hole and trying to figure out how do I get over it for the next year, for the next 6 months, for the next 2 years, whatever the case. You're walking, you see the hole coming, you're changing directions, you're changing the way you go. You're seeing that setback come. You hit the wall. Instead of stopping at the wall and trying to figure out, well, damn, woe is me. Like, why'd that happen to me? Why did I have to be the one to run into the wall? You say, okay, why did I run into that wall? How can I get over that wall? How can I get around that wall? But you immediately get back up and you immediately start moving again, and you immediately start executing again. You never let yourself get stuck in the planning stage. And then the other thing we're talking about is building habits. And we've been hammering this home with almost every single letter of the free hour ABCs. Just like attitude, just like beliefs, just like time management. It's about building habits, because everything that we are trying to do, it's not going to be a one-time. It's not going to be a one-off. It's not going to be a one-time and that's it. That's all you have to do it. It's the same concept with working out. It's the same concept with your willpower muscle. You have to continuously and constantly flex it. You have to get in there and you have to use it. You have to build up that strength. And the way that you do that is through habits. Replacing your old habits, dropping your bad habits, coming up with new habits, forming new habits that are getting you to where you want to go, getting you to where these roles are. That's execution. Putting habits in place, putting systems in place. Everything is systemic. Habits are systems. When your life becomes like a well-oiled machine and you have all these systems in place that automatically carry you toward that goal, that end destination. Some of those habits are going to be hard as fuck to get up and do. But you know what? Because you've been doing it. It's easier just to slip into it. And I'm going to give you an example of it. When I went to the gym with two of my coworkers today, this morning, early as fuck. Barely got any sleep. Come to find out, all of us didn't get that much sleep. All of us were thinking about not going. But because it was a habit, because it was something that we've been doing, we just went. Because it was a habit to do the type of workouts that we were doing, because it was a habit to kind of go hard on our legs and shit, it just happened. We were fighting the entire way, like, man, I don't feel like doing that. I don't want to do this. But because it was a habit, we just did it. We didn't have to convince our mind to execute. We are already executing. We are already in the execution phase because we have built habits, because we have made things habitual. You have to do consistent execution. You have to be mindful of the execution. And you have to just continue to do these things, make them habit. So that way your willpower muscle doesn't have to flex against everything like it's brand new. Every day that you wake up and you want to go to the gym, every day that you wake up and you want to read out of the book, every day that you wake up and you want to go learn something new that's going to help you, every day that you wake up and you design something, every day that you wake up and you get up and do what it is that you're trying to do that's going to make your life better, that is going to get you to the place that you want to go, every day that you get up and you have that conversation with your children and get closer to them or go play with them or do something or take your spouse on a date or work on that relationship and work on that communication. Every single day that you do that makes that willpower muscle have to flex less and less and less and less until you're no longer faking it till you make it, until you're no longer looking at the person that you want to be and realizing that that person does these actions, and you start to realize that, no, I do these actions. You are becoming the person that you know you want to be because you do those actions automatically. They are habit. You have been executing. You are no longer planning. You're no longer thinking about. You are no longer trying to focus on. You're no longer trying to see it and visualize in your mind's eye. You're just going for it. You're going after it. You're getting to it, and you're doing what you need to do every single day. That's the importance of building habit, especially when it comes to execution. It's not coming off of a starting line from a dead stop. It's just continuing to run for something when you've already been running. One of the things I notice, especially when I run, is that when I first start running, it's the hardest. It's hard as shit. Then when I get about to between 3/4 of a mile to a mile, my back starts clutching on me. Like my liver is just trying to jump out of my body. And then once I get to a mile, it's like my feet start hurting, my knees start hurting, my lower back is already hurting, my hips are screaming at me, everything's screaming at me. My throat gets dry, I'm trying to swallow some water, I can't barely do it. Everything starts hurting. But then when I look at that time and I look at that distance and I just say, you know what, I'm just gonna keep going, and I just keep going, it's so much easier just to keep going than it is to start from a stop. It's so much easier just to keep going than it was to start from the beginning. It's so much easier to keep going than if you slow down and try to restart. It's just so much easier. And that's habits. And next, we talked about this last time. We talked about how to get over procrastination. We talked about how to get over distractions. It's the same way. You schedule your time, you prioritize, and you just have things as routine. These are your routines. These are just the things that you do. It's automatic. It's easier to get away from distractions. So we talked about procrastination. I'm gonna talk a little bit more about distractions, especially as it pertains to like execution. Because one of the things that happens is this, and I talked a lot about this with the willpower thing last week. When it comes to me with my willpower, right? I could say no. Like if somebody put something in my face and said, "Here, you want this?" I could say no 10 times, 20 times, 30 times, 100 times, 200 times, right? But if I am putting myself in that place where that is going to continuously be put in my presence, put in my eyesight, all it takes is one time to give in to that distraction. So when you are executing, when you are going into your habits, when you are going into your time management, when you are going into these things, you are not making room for distractions. Obviously, things are going to pop up that are out of your control. But the thing is that you can control, for the most part, where you go, who you interact with, who you come across, and how you react to all of those things, how you feel about all of those things. You can control how you feel about the way that people act with you. You can control how you feel about the way people talk to you. You can control how you react. And the essence of that, of getting away from those distractions, is first putting yourself in situations where those distractions are going to be rare. I don't put myself in situations where somebody's going to offer me that stuff. I don't put myself in situations where that could be, it's a higher percentage that it will be around than not. I don't put myself in those things where distractions are going to be more than a possibility, a high probability. I don't put myself there. I put myself in places where it's a very low probability that those distractions happen. So when the distractions do happen, my willpower muscle is there. My routine is rock solid. My habits are there. My mind is already focused on what it is that I am currently doing and executing on. I am not stuck in the planning phase to where I have another thing to think about. I am just doing, and I have another thing to either avoid, or another thing to get over, or another thing to get under, or another thing to just embrace, and another thing to accept, whatever the case may be. And that's how I get away from distractions. And then when I talk about fear of failure, a lot of us have fear of failure. A lot of us have fear of failure. We have fear of poverty. We have fear of being alone. One of the things that happens to us when it comes to execution, when it comes to pulling the trigger on these things, is we fear being judged. We fear, what are people going to say when we start making these things that we're doing? We fear, what if nobody ever watches me, right? What if I never break like 100 views? What if I never break like 100 subscribers? Well, I did 100. What if I never hit 150? What if I never hit 200? What if this never goes to where that I want to go? That fear can paralyze you. What are people going to say if I'm trying to put myself out there in a public forum? What are people going to say if I'm trying to switch careers, even though I have a family? What are people going to say if I'm trying to invent something new? Or if I'm trying to bring something new to the table that can help so many people and bring my family generational wealth? What are people going to say? And what happens if I fail? What happens if I put my time, my energy, my money, my heart, my soul, everything behind this, and it fails? What happens? What happens? What if? What if? What if? And the problem is that we are so scared of failure that it literally paralyzes us. It never allows us to execute. It never allows us to act. It never allows us to take that first step. If you're scared of drowning, you're not going to take that leap into that water so that you can cross over, because you can't cross the waters by sitting on the shore and looking. And you cannot hope to get to a new place if you're sticking by the coast. You can't hope to get anywhere. You can't hope to succeed if you are so scared of failure that you don't execute, or you don't execute to the fullest. Because what happens if I'm alone? What happens if this doesn't bring me the adoration or the adulation? What happens if me just being at my house and creating all of these things and working the way I work and doing the school that I'm doing, or whatever the case. I know a lot of people, they don't want to get in debt with the school. They don't want to do the school thing. But what happens if you're just so on your square, so on your zone, so on your goals that you aren't allowed to, that doing those things doesn't allow you to bring or interact with other people? What happens when them friendships go away because you outgrow them? What happens when that relationship goes away because you outgrow it? What happens when that person that you really want to be with starts to not look so appealing because you outgrow them? Or they start ridiculing what it is that you got going on. Or they reject the fact that you're so focused on what you're doing that you can't give them all of your time. You can't give them all of your gifts and shower them with all of your attention, because you're already showering all of your attention and all of your time and all of your heart and all of your soul on where it is that you're trying to go. Fear of being alone, fear of being judged, and then fear of poverty. If you go all in on this, if you go all in on this and you burn all those bridges, or you don't acknowledge those bridges, or you don't keep the relationships up to where you could go back on those bridges, or if you don't have the fallback, if you know that this is going to happen for you, if you know it so much that you go for it and then you fail, especially as a man, what happens to you then? What happens to you? Are you going to end up like one of them homeless people on the street? Are you going to end up like not having a way to support yourself and not having a roof over your head? That fear of poverty, it can keep you paralyzed. It can keep you in safety. It can keep you in complacency. It can keep you up here trying to plan and strategize and plot a scheme and all this other shit. Trying to case the joint, basically, instead of just pulling the trigger, hitting that lick, going to get that safe. Making that idea a reality, starting to create what you want to create, starting to try and draw up designs for the things that you want to implement, putting that money into that tip that you got, putting that money into not only that tip that you got, but all this time that you spent learning the market and learning trends and all this other stuff and all of these things that you're seeing in your own mind. And you're just like, well, what if I put that money in there and I lose it? But what if you don't and it hits? What if you never create nothing and you never help that person from committing suicide? What if you never write that book and you never become that bestseller? What if you never switch to that new job and you never become a CEO? What if you never start your business and start making millions of dollars? What if you never invent that thing that saves millions of lives every year? What happens when you don't do that? You're too worried about yourself and not worried about what happens if you don't. You're worried about what happens if. What happens if I fail? What happens if I go broke? What happens if I don't succeed? What happens if I'm alone? What happens if you don't do this stuff? What happens not only to you, what happens to your kids? What happens to the world? If you don't create what you want to create, if you're not there to help people, if you're not there to bring that thing to the world that you know the world needs, that only you can do. Only you can do that shit. There's only one person in a generation that can do that shit, and that's you. There's only one person in a generation that can communicate the way that you can communicate. That's you. There's only one person in a generation that has the idea that you got. That's you. There's only one person in a generation that can sing the way you would sing. That's you. There's only one person in a generation that can do those things the way that you do those things and connect to those people the way that you connect to those people, or design the way that you design, or bring those things to the way that you bring those people. There's only one person, and that's you. And what happens if you don't do that? That's what you should be more scared of than this fear of failure. All right? Execute. 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 Go for it. It's time to start. We're coming up to the end of we're coming up to the end of the free hour. The last video, man, because we're at X, we just did X. Next is going to be Y. Last one's going to be Z. Then the very last video is going to be a nice video where we sum up everything. And I'm going to talk about how we can put everything into action on a daily basis. And then we're going to start actually getting to the meat and bones of the free hour. And we're going to go over everything, man, but you need to execute. It's time to execute. We've talked about the way that we feel about ourselves. We've talked about the way that we believe about ourselves. We've talked about how our choices can shape us. We've talked about how our desires and dreams can shape us. We've talked about how our habits can shape us, how our thoughts can shape us. We've talked about how everything on the inside can shape us. We've talked about all of those things. We've even talked a little bit about relationships. We've talked about self-image. We've talked about the inner so much. And it's time to bring it out and affect the outer. It's just time to get out there with it. It's time to go after it. It's time to do it. It's time to execute. Think about what happens to the world if you don't. All right? If you like the video, man, like the video, man. Share your thoughts with me. Share your thoughts with me about where you are in your execution, about where you are in your journey, about the adjustments you've had to make. But also share with me how far you've come. How much farther you are today because you decided to execute last year. Share that with that person. Think about where you were last year. If you had never decided to execute last year, where would you be? You wouldn't be where you are today. You wouldn't have made that progress. And then that way, the people who are still waiting to execute, the people who are still waiting to pull the trigger, the people who are still waiting for that perfect moment can see how far that you've come. If you like it, subscribe to the channel, man. It's a free hour. Your boy Trevor Turner. This has been Execute. Deuces.